Hello Internet, and welcome back to my reviews of the X-Men movies leading up to Deadpool and Wolverine. Last time we covered Deadpool, and now we've made it to the follow-up to X-Men Days of Future Past, and the start of the declining state of the X-Men movies. I'm talking, of course, about X-Men Apocalypse. Released on May 27, 2016, just a few weeks after Captain America Civil War, and exactly 3 months after the worldwide phenomenon known as Deadpool, X-Men Apocalypse takes place 10 years after the events of X-Men Days of Future Past. Bryan Singer returns to direct this film after Days of Future Past, in which this is his last time directing the X-Men movies. In this movie, we see younger versions of your favorite X-Men like Cyclops, played by Ty Sheridan. Ty Sheridan would later go on to play Wade Watts, or Parzival, in the film adaptation of Ernest Cline's novel Ready Player One. Then there's Sansa Stark as Jean Grey. I know it's Sophie Turner, but she's best known for playing Sansa Stark on Game of Thrones. Then there's Alexandra Shipp as Storm. She spends the first half of the movie allied with Apocalypse as one of the Four Horsemen. And then, the return of one of the best characters in X2, Kurt Wagner, or as he was known in the Munich circus, Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler here is played by Cody Smith McPhee. The film's titular antagonist is named Apocalypse, and is played by Oscar Isaac, best known for playing Poe Dameron in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, Miguel O'Hara in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Moon Knight, and Duke Leto Atreides, Father Rapal Atreides in Dune. And as you can see, he looks hideous. His comic book counterpart looks menacing, and is one of the X-Men's greatest foes. But here, he doesn't look like Apocalypse at all. So therefore, I'm gonna spend the entire review calling him Imposter Lips.
God damn it, Barb!
Returning from X-Men Days of Future Past is Evan Peters as Quicksilver. Then we have the return of Rose Byrne as Moira McTaggart, who Charles Xavier, played by James McAvoy, had her memories erased. I previously reviewed this film on my old channel as Sonic and Shonic, but like with Deadpool, I wanted to revisit this film, as well as Logan and Deadpool 2, in the style of these kinds of film reviews. This video will contain spoilers to X-Men Apocalypse, so if you have not seen X-Men Apocalypse, caution. It's not as good as Days of Future Past, but nowhere near as bad as X-Men Origins Wolverine. But if you have seen X-Men Apocalypse, hop aboard as we explore yet another entry in the X-Men series that marked the official decline of the franchise. But the next 2 films after this are actually smash hits. Dark Phoenix and the New Mutants, on the other hand, those are going to be one hell of a fucking doozy to get through. I am going to need a bunch of alcoholic drinks to get through those 2 movies. This movie, not so much. But anyway, these are my thoughts and mine alone. This is X-Men Apocalypse. This movie starts off in the year 3600 BC, in ancient Egypt. Too bad we don't get to see a cameo appearance from Yami Yugi in this scene, or anybody from the Prince of Egypt. En Sabah Nur, or as he is best known, Apocalypse, or as I like to call him, Imposter Lips, rules over ancient Egypt as the world's first mutant, or so it's believed. He sends his consciousness into another man's body to gain his healing factor. His 4 followers are known as the Four Horsemen of Apocalypse, which is a reference to the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse as mentioned in the Book of Revelation in the New Testament of the Bible. The original 4 Horsemen are people whose names I can't even think of for the life of me, but in the present day, when Apocalypse returns, he recruits Magneto, played once again by Michael Fassbender, Psylocke, played by Olivia Munn, Archangel, played by Ben Hardy, and Storm. Imposter Lips and the Not-So-Fantastic Four are betrayed by conspirators. The Not-So-Fantastic Four are killed one by one, and En Sabah Nur is buried alive. We then cut to the year 1983, in which the top-grossing film of that year was Return of the Jedi. In fact, some of the young X-Men actually get out of a movie theater after seeing Return of the Jedi, and Jean Grey even makes a comment about how the 3rd movie is always the worst. Such is the case with X-Men Apocalypse. Oh, and I can think of many other examples of this. Jurassic Park 3, Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines, RoboCop 3, The Rise of Skywalker, Blade Trinity, The Matrix Revolutions, Spider-Man 3, X-Men The Last Stand, Twilight Eclipse, The Chronicles of Narnia The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Iron Man 3, Superman 3, Alien 3, Cars 3, and of course Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. However, there are a few exceptions here and there where the 3rd entry is the best, like The Return of the King, Die Hard with a Vengeance, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Toy Story 3, Rocky 3, Captain America Civil War, Thor Ragnarok, Avengers Infinity War, Spider-Man No Way Home, Army of Darkness, Mission Impossible 3, Back to the Future Part 3, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I'm just hoping Sonic the Hedgehog 3 ends up as the best 3rd movie, and not the worst 3rd movie. I mean, come on! We've got Keanu Reeves as Shadow the fucking Hedgehog. Could possibly get any better than that. So anyway, we then cut to Scott Summers, played by Ty Sheridan. He's in your ordinary human high school when the teacher talks about the incident at the White House where Michael Fassbender makes mutants known to the world. When he goes to the bathroom, his mutation unlocks and he blasts the whole fucking place with his laser eyes. His brother Alex, played once again by Lucas Till, brings him to Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, where he learns to control his mutant abilities, as he accidentally destroys Charles's favorite tree planted by his grandfather. And instead of being expelled, Scott is enrolled as Charles is impressed with his abilities. On another side of the world, we see Nightcrawler in a cage match with Archangel, in which we find one of the film's biggest plot holes. In X-Men The Last Stand, we see a younger Angel in the 90s trying to cut off his wings, and a 20-something-year-old Warren Worthington III reject the mutant cure that his father tries to give him. And here, we don't know for certain if it's Warren Worthington III, because the credits never reveal his real name. But anyway, Raven, played once again by Jennifer Lawrence, spends the first part of the movie trying to help Nightcrawler get to America. There they meet Caliban, a mutant with the ability to sense and track other mutants without the use of Cerebro. In this movie, Caliban is played by Thomas Lemarquis. Sorry if I botched the name, I didn't have time to look up interviews with this guy. Caliban would then return in Logan and be played by Stephen Merchant, who is best known for playing the voice of Wheatley in Portal 2, as well as the Portal 2 level pack in LEGO Dimensions. As for Eric Lencher, he's living a quiet life in Poland with a wife and daughter. He takes on a new name, Henrik, and he works at a steel factory. One day, while an accident at the factory happens, he rescues one of his co-workers by exposing his mutant powers. And it turns out that his daughter is a mutant herself with the ability to influence animals around her, and summoning animals when she's in danger. So hold up! Does that mean Snow White is a mutant herself, summoning animals with song? Or Pocahontas summoning the colors of the wind? Or perhaps Cinderella singing to her animal friends to do her fucking chores for her, while living with her abusive stepmother, Lady Tremaine, and her equally abusive daughters? What about Giselle from Enchanted? In order to summon animals, she sings to them. Well, it's a no-brainer that Elsa from Frozen is a mutant because she was born with ice powers. Now, Magneto's daughter being a mutant herself with the ability to control and influence wildlife around her brings up a very important question about your favorite Disney princesses, particularly those who sing to animals. After Magneto is exposed for being a mutant, the Polish police come in to apprehend him. They take his daughter hostage in exchange for him to turn himself in. His daughter exposes her mutant powers, and the police end up killing his wife and daughter, and in his hour of despair, he kills the officers. In Cairo, Moira McTaggart discovers a cult who worships imposter lips, who chant for him to awaken, in the likes of Indiana Jones at the Temple of Doom. Eventually, Imposter Lips awakens, and is disoriented after being asleep for Lord knows how many years.
10,000 years will give you such a crick in the neck!
Speaking of Aladdin, Aurora Monroe is a street rat, who often steals shit to survive. She lives in Cairo, and she is discovered by Imposter Lips. Imposter Lips learns about humanity, and he determines that humanity has lost its way, but he plans to remake the world by any means necessary. He even enhances Storm's powers as she becomes one of his followers. And there's one thing about Storm in this movie that I don't like. Her accent. Throughout this entire movie, she speaks in an accent that Halle Berry would never in a million years speak in. How did she learn to speak in an American accent after 20 or so years between the events of this movie and the first X-Men movie from 2000? Oh, trust me! The plot holes in this movie are nowhere near as bad as the ones in Dark fucking Phoenix! Raven takes Kurt to Xavier's School per Caliban's advice, where she tries to warn Charles about Eric. And there, she and Hank McCoy, played once again by Nicholas Hoult, have a happy reunion. And speaking of Caliban, he is visited by Imposter Lips and Storm, who recruit his assistant Psylocke to join his cause. And shortly afterwards, Archangel joins their cause too as Imposter Lips changes his wings from feather to metal. And their last member is Eric, who delivers his absolute best line in the X-Men movies upon meeting Imposter Lips.
Who the fuck are you?
If you really want to know who the fuck that is not Apocalypse. This is Apocalypse. This, however, is a cosplayer who tried to come up with an Apocalypse cosplay in under 30 minutes, but was rushed out the door to get to Comic-Con before it got busy, and didn't have time to check himself in the mirror to see if there was anything wrong with his cosplay, and if he truly does look like Apocalypse in the X-Men comics and cartoon. And then, we get one of the most satisfying scenes with Eric, when Imposter Lips brings him back to Auschwitz, where his life went to shambles because of Kevin Bacon. Imposter Lips shows Eric the true extent of his powers, and he becomes an earthbender, and he completely destroys Auschwitz. Now that right there is a great way to rid the world of one of his most terrifying places. But anyway, back on to X-Men Apocalypse. Charles and Hank find Moira, where they learn more about Imposter Lips and his followers, and how he influenced the New Testament in the Bible. At the same time, the world's biggest dickhead, William Stryker, is conspiring against them. Later on, he'll capture a good chunk of the X-Men after we get the movie's only good scene, which I will cover in just a bit. Charles tries to contact Eric via Cerebro, but his presence is felt by Imposter Lips, who completely fucks with his mind. he is forced to make countries launch their nuclear arsenals into space, and where Stanley and his wife Joan watch in horror. Now, I feel this sequence is an indirect reference to the birth of Nuclear Man in Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. Of course, I've never seen Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, and I'm hesitant to do so. But if I am gonna do film reviews of the Superman movies before we get James Gunn's Superman in 2025, that movie is on the list. However, the only Superman movie I'm not gonna review on this channel is Man of Steel. Hey, remember Quicksilver? Remember his standout scene in Days of Future Past? Want to see happen again? Well, today's your lucky day, folks! Because as soon as Imposter Lips captures Charles, Alex tries to stop him, but he destroys the mansion. And as it slowly crumbles, Evan Peters has another badass Quicksilver moment, just like Days of Future Past slow motion sequence, but dialed to 11. I'm gonna show the clip here, but to avoid getting in trouble for using licensed music, I'm gonna swap out Sweet Dreams by Eurythmics and replace it with Sonic the Hedgehog music and sound effects.
That was cool!
The bad news is that this is the last time we're ever gonna get a badass scene with Quicksilver in the X-Men movies. Because even though we see Evan Peters again in Dark Phoenix, there is no scene like that in Dark Phoenix. And that's one of the reasons why Dark Phoenix is the worst X-Men film since X-Men Origins Wolverine. And also, despite X-Men Apocalypse being not that great, the Quicksilver scene is still the highlight of the movie. Turns out that Alex was killed in the explosion, much to Scott's horror. And then, the unthinkable happens. William Stryker comes in and captures Raven, Hank, Moira, and Quicksilver, who should have been named Pietro instead of Peter. But it's Fox, and they can do whatever the fuck they want. So then, Scott, Jean, and Nightcrawler make it aboard one of Stryker's helicopters, and they head on over to what I believe is Alkali Lake from X2. They don't even mention it, but let's call it Alkali Lake. When Scott, Jean, and Nightcrawler make it over there, they set up a rescue mission to get the other X-Men out of there. It's also revealed that Magneto is Peter's father. Again, I'm more used to saying Pietro instead of Peter. It's not Kevin Feige's fault for that one. Scott, Jean, and Nightcrawler's big plan on getting the other X-Men out of there is by unleashing Weapon X, who, surprise surprise, is none other than Hugh Jackman himself. That's right, Wolverine is back in the second best scene in the movie, which isn't saying a whole lot given how the rest of the movie turned out. The reason the other mutants, and Moira, got captured is so the mutants can be experimented on. They believe that the X-Men are suspects of Imposter Ellipse's attack by sending nuclear missiles into space. So then Wolverine, who doesn't speak a single word in this movie, kills Stryker's soldiers and goes on a rampage. We have to wait one more movie until we get to see an R-rated Wolverine. I talk about how satisfying it is seeing an R-rated Wolverine, but more on that when I talk about Logan. So then, after Wolverine's rampage, Jean restores his memories, and he just takes off, and we won't see him again until Logan. Meanwhile, with Imposter Lips, he uses Charles to send a message to the world that he is unstoppable and that nobody should fuck with him, while also convincing Jean to unleash her full potential, the Phoenix within, if you will. Imposter Lips wants to transfer his consciousness into Charles' body to gain his psychic powers. Eric, meanwhile, uses his upgraded powers to create destruction across the planet. So then, the X-Men, who steal a bunch of flight suits from Alkali Lake, which they didn't have time to go into a fitting room to see if they fit, nor did they see if they would look good on camera, head on over to Cairo for one last battle against Imposter Lips. Raven and Peter convince Eric to mend his ways and turn against Imposter Lips, but Peter decides not to tell Eric that he's his father for some fucking reason. And after spending a good chunk of the final battle fighting against the X-Men, Storm ultimately joins the X-Men and turns on Imposter Lips after attacking Raven, who is Storm's inspiration after the events of Days of Future Past. Charles then loses his hair as a result of Imposter Lips trying to possess his body, and he battles him in the astral plane. Not the same one from Black Panther, mind you. Charles gets beaten into submission until Jean enters the astral plane and finishes off Imposter Lips by tapping into the Phoenix Force and blowing the shithead into the Shadow Realm. But in the ensuing battle, Psylocke escapes, and that's the last we see of her. And so the day is saved. Eric and Jean restore the school, and Charles, who now has his signature baldness, restores Moira's memories, and they develop a relationship that goes absolutely fucking nowhere, because poor Moira McTaggart doesn't even appear in Dark Phoenix. And after realizing that there will always be threats from humans and mutants alike, Charles agrees to train his students to become X-Men. Charles and Eric rekindle their friendship, as Eric leaves the school, leaving Raven to train Scott, Storm, Jean, Nightcrawler, and Quicksilver to become X-Men. Now this begs the question, when does Raven become one of the bad guys? Because when she was played by Rebecca Romaine, she's one of Ian McKellen's right-hand goons. Now this question right here is cut short when Raven dies in Dark Phoenix. More on the plot holes of Dark Phoenix when it comes time for me to talk about it over a crazy amount of alcohol. And then, a post-credit scene that goes absolutely fucking nowhere. A bunch of men make it to the Weapon X facility at what I believe is Alkali Lake to retrieve a blood sample and an x-ray of Weapon X on behalf of the Essex Corporation. A teaser for Mr. Sinister's involvement in the X-Men series, which sadly never happens because of Disney. We hear the name Essex again in the New Mutants, but again, this leads to fuck all because the X-Men series came to an abrupt halt in favor of the X-Men joining the MCU, and in favor of Deadpool and Wolverine, and that's the end of the movie. I'm giving X-Men Apocalypse a 5 out of 10. This is not a good movie, but it's not awful either. There are 2 standout scenes, and that's pretty much it. The rest of the movie is just a straight up mess. Apocalypse's makeup is definitely the worst thing about this movie, and it's overall inferior to Days of Future Past. I didn't really like Storm's accent in this movie because Halle Berry never spoke in it with her portrayal of Storm. But I did like Ty Sheridan as Cyclops and Sophie Turner as Jean Grey, but they are nowhere near as good as James Marsden or Famke Janssen. James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender are great in their roles as Charles and Eric as always, and it was great to see Evan Peters again, but the script that they were given is not that great. But hey, it's nowhere near as bad as 2015 Fantastic Four or Madam Web, and it makes me glad that I decided at the last second not to review Madam Web on this channel. But I'm still going to review Dark Phoenix and the New Mutants, despite how bad those movies are. But X-Men Apocalypse is bland and inferior to Days of Future Past. But here on out, there are 2 great movies and 2 awful movies left, as the X-Men film series grinds to an abrupt halt for no fucking reason. I can say the same about the now dead DCEU in favor of the new DCU, particularly the forgettable conclusion known simply as Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. In fact, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is what I consider to be the New Mutants of DC, but more on that when I cover the New Mutants. Stay tuned for my upcoming review of Logan coming soon. Till then, I'll see you all next time.